Hello everyone, welcome to Ottery Musings. I'm Tim and I'm coming to you this morning from our home and garden here in Ottery. I can't believe we've been here now nearly 5 years since we came from Australia, and over the last 18 months or so, this garden that you see behind me has been particularly important to us as our place of safety, as the injunction has been stay home, stay safe. So this has been our safe place, our place of refuge. And so the fact is that safety and the need to feel safe is really important in the human psyche. It's foundational, it's fundamental to our emotional mental well-being. A psychologist of the last century, Abraham Maslow, was famous for his hierarchy of needs concept, and he identified the need for safety or safety needs as second only to our physiological needs. That's the need to breathe, eat, drink, sleep, and so on. So it really is fundamental to our well-being. And can it be any wonder then that COVID has been so difficult in many ways for us, because it's undermined and eroded our sense of safety and served to make us feel really quite unsafe. And it's the reason I think people have willingly embraced those measures to mitigate risk, such as wearing of masks, social distancing, meeting outside, and washing hands and so on, and particularly embrace the vaccination because it has the potential to provide a real sense of safety. And so it's really important to feel safe, but the reality is that it's not only a pandemic that has the potential to deliver a sense of insecurity and make us feel unsafe. The circumstances of life, changing circumstances, particularly when those changes are unwelcome, can make us feel unsafe. We may not identify it as such, but that's the reality. Changes in our relationships, particularly if it's a relationship breakdown, it can make us feel unsafe and insecure. It may be changes in our body as we're getting older that can make us feel unsafe and put us at threat. Maybe a new job or moving house. All these things have the potential to threaten our sense of safety and well-being. And then there's particularly loss. Loss of a loved one can shift the ground under our feet and make us feel insecure. Those things that are all that's become normal and predictable moves and changes. It can be loss of health, loss of mobility, loss of mental health in ourselves, or the loss of mental health and well-being in a loved one, or loss of a job, loss of income. So all these things have the potential to make us feel unsafe. And the effect of feeling unsafe is to create stress. And we all react to stress differently. It can make us feel anxious, afraid, angry, sad, irritable, frustrated, depressed, or all the above at different times. All these effects of stress in our bodies. And so one thing I'm thinking right now is that you're saying to me, I tuned into Musings to hear something cheerful and to feel encouraged, and all I'm hearing so far is rather depressing. But let me reassure you that the good news is coming, and I'm going to read it to you actually from the book of Psalms, and it's Psalm 91. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him I will trust. Surely He will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the perilous pestilence. He shall cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you shall take refuge. Such diversity of metaphor. On the one hand, God's place of safety is a fortress. I think of stability, strength, certainty, immovability, and longevity. But then on the other hand, the metaphor is used here of a wing to cover us, the wing of a bird, and of feathers. When I think of feathers, I think of a wing, I think of sensitivity, I think of tenderness, I think of embrace and of nurture and of tender care. Such diversity, yet no one metaphor could possibly capture or encapsulate the beauty and the greatness of God's care for us and His love for us and His provision for us when we're going through these difficult times in our lives. In tropical Australia, it's not uncommon to have cyclones, as it is in other tropical parts of the world. And the cyclone, more than many other things, has the potential to deliver unwelcome change and loss of property, and sadly sometimes loss of life. And yet apparently the eye of the storm, which is right at the centre, is a complete absence of wind, and apparently the clouds part and the heaven is opened. What a picture that is of what God has purposed and promised for us in times of stress and difficult changes and times of loss. A place of security and respite. And the fact is, the eye of the storm is not an escape hatch. In fact, the eye walls is where the most damaging winds are, around the eye. It can only be a place of respite from what's past and perhaps the opportunity to prepare for what's to come. But you know, it's interesting, in the narrative of the Bible, God seldom takes His people out of difficult times. In fact, sometimes He seems to almost engineer them. But He reveals Himself in the middle of them. I think of the children of Israel through the wilderness, and God revealed Himself in fire and cloud. There's three characters in the book of Daniel called Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, who were thrown into a fiery furnace because of their trust in God. And God revealed Himself in the fire as a fourth person, and they came out unscathed. And then there's Daniel himself, who is famous for his going into the lion's den, and God was there and closed the lions' mouths. God doesn't take us, it seems, out of painful times, but He does meet with us in the middle of them. There's a scripture in Psalm 46 verse 10 that says, "Be still and know that I am God." After this musical interlude, we're going to talk and explore a little bit more about what that might look like in those times of difficulty.
Be still for the presence of the Lord, the Holy One is here. Come bow before Him now, reverence and fear. In him no sin is found. We stand on holy ground. Be still for the presence of the Lord. The Holy One is here. Be still for the glory of the Lord is shining all around. He burns with holy fire. In splendor he is crowned. How awesome is the sight! Our radiant King of light. Be still for the glory of the Lord is shining all around. Be still for the power of the Lord is moving in this place. He comes to cleanse and heal, to minister his grace. No work too hard for him. In faith receive from him. Be still for the power of the Lord is moving in this place.
Jesus said in Matthew 6 verse 6, when you pray, go to your room and close the door. The inference is a place of seclusion and quietness. But reality is, if you're living alone or you've lost a loved one recently, you may feel your life is already too quiet. And fact is that living in rural Devon, it's not really hard to find a place of quietness. No, I think sometimes the big challenge is to find quietness on the inside. Because when we're going through difficult times, unwanted change or loss, the intrusion of unwelcome thoughts and feelings and emotions make it hard to feel quiet and at peace and at rest and find that eye of the storm. Dwelling on the past, it can make us feel depressed, and the intrusion of worrying thoughts about the future can make us feel anxious. And these thoughts and feelings can't just be switched off. We're not wired that way. My dad used to say, you can't stop a bird landing on your head, but you don't have to let it build a nest. And sometimes it's important to just acknowledge these thoughts and feelings and to notice them, but then somehow to perhaps transfer our attention away, let them pass, and bring our attention to the present and to the presence of God, because God's presence is in the present. He revealed himself to Moses as the I am. I'm not an English scholar, but I am is present tense. It's here and now. And sometimes we need some help to bring our attention into the present moment, into the presence of God. A candle can be helpful. It reminds us that God is our light in the darkness. Or it might be a landscape, it might be a sunset, something to help us just anchor our attention in the present moment and connect us to God. Something that I've found helpful is this cross, which if you belong to the parish church will look familiar. I've had this for quite a number of years and I use it every day. And it just reminds me that the cross is empty. And when Jesus died, he redeemed suffering and death. And such that Paul was able to say in Romans 8:28, and we know that all things work together for good. All things work together for good to those who love God. That somehow God can redeem my suffering and my stress and my difficulty and turn it to blessing in some unexpected way. But my cross is dual purpose. It also reminds me of an anchor. It reminds me of the one that's mounted down at Branscombe that belonged to that ill-fated cargo ship. And an anchor reminds me of connection, because they connect an ancient sailing ship it passes through the uncertain element of water with all its risk and uncertainty, and it connects to the rocks below and provides certainty. And there's a difference between life and death. Hebrews 6:19 through 20 says, "This hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, which enters the presence behind the veil, where the forerunner has entered for us, even Jesus." I think that road's getting more noisy, but I hope you can still hear me. Jesus passed through the element of time. He experienced humanity, he experienced suffering, he experienced death, and he passed through into the presence of God. And through trust we can connect to him, and he becomes our anchor, our place of certainty and security. Some years ago, Jen and I went on a cruise in the South Pacific, closer to Australia than it is to here. And we visited the Isle of Pines one day. And I recall that, of course, Isle of Pines, far too small an island to accommodate a huge cruise ship. And it stood half a mile or so offshore. And we were ferried to the island. And I found out afterwards from the captain that that ship didn't need an anchor. It had a computer-controlled motor and a propeller that turned through 360 degrees and held the ship to a very small margin in one position. We're not designed like a cruise ship to cruise through life without connection or need for anchor. We might survive for a while winds are favourable, waters are smooth, life is predictable, and all is well. But when the storm hits, when things go wrong, when unwelcome change comes, when we experience loss, there's this realization of the need for connection. We found that even during COVID, how important our human connections are. But human connections are only a finite replica or reminder of our design and need for connection to God and to his presence. Augustine of Hippo said, "Thou hast made us for thyself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it finds its rest in thee." Our security in times of change and loss comes from Christ, our anchor, that has passed through uncertainty of life and is secured in the Rock of Ages.
Will your anchor hold in the storms of life? plights unfold their wings of strife, when the strong tides lift and the cables strain, will your anchor drift or firm remain? We have an anchor that keeps the soul steadfast and sure while the billows roll, fastened to the rock which cannot move, grounded firm and deep in the Savior's love. Held secure by faith in the Savior's hands, shielded by His grace, on Christ we stand. He is Lord of all, we should never doubt. Through uncertain times, He is solid ground. We have an anchor that keeps the soul steadfast and sure while the billows roll, fastened to the rock which cannot move, grounded firm and deep in the Savior's love. You have carried us through the raging sea, in the fire and flood. We stand redeemed through the storms of life. You will not let go. This our confidence that our anchor holds. We have an anchor that keeps the soul steadfast and sure while the billows roll, fastened to the rock which cannot move, grounded firm and deep in the Savior's love. We have an anchor that keeps the soul steadfast and sure while the billows roll, fastened to the rock which cannot move, grounded firm and deep in the Savior's love. Grounded firm and deep in the Savior's love. We're grounded firm and deep in the Savior's